This could end up leaving China as the world's only viable civilization.
What is the state of the Chinese Communist Party's biological warfare programs?
One that concerns me the most is their program to develop pathogens to attack specific ethnic groups. And that's why I talk about a civilization killer, because all non-Chinese would be either sickened or killed by this. Remember, China has been collecting DNA profiles of foreigners. The largest collection of DNA profiles of Americans, for instance, is not in America, it's in China. We should be concerned about the DNA profile of every American because China can develop diseases that will hobble our society.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. The U.S. intelligence community recently concluded that they cannot draw a hard conclusion on where the virus actually came from, mainly because the Chinese Communist Party will not cooperate with the U.S. And this means a couple things. It means, one, that the United States cannot really go after the Chinese Communist Party and claim that it is responsible for the release of this virus. And it also means that if this was, in fact, a Chinese-made virus or something related to the laboratories, man-made or not, we've literally let the Chinese Communist Party get away with murder, so to speak. And what does this mean going forward? Well, here to talk with us about this is Gordon Chang. He's author of The Coming Collapse of China. And Gordon, it's a real pleasure having you on Crossroads.
Well, thank you so much, Josh.
So why don't we start by talking about this U.S. intelligence assessment first off. Then I want to go into China's biowarfare programs. What is essentially the conclusion from the U.S. intelligence community on the origin of this virus?
The conclusion is that there are two plausible possibilities, and they use that word plausible. One of them is that it's a natural zoonotic transfer, a natural mutation from a bat to a human, and the other is that it is a lab-associated incident, as they say. But they also report, and this is obviously true, that China has not been cooperating with the international community, and it's been blaming the United States. And that, to me, means that the President of the United States has enough information to act. That's because China knows what happened, and they're not telling us. And that alone is enough. But there's also a couple of other reasons. One of them is that, of course, China, wherever this disease came from, took steps to deliberately spread it beyond its borders. They lied about contagiousness. And while locking down their own country, they pressured other countries not to impose travel restrictions and quarantines. And we also know that they're working on a new generation of biological weapons that could be a civilization killer. So we put all that together. It means that President Biden must act. We must establish deterrence to prevent the Chinese from spreading the next pathogen.
Wow, it's pretty serious, a civilization killer. I want to get to these bioweapons programs in just a bit. But I know in one of your recent articles you talked about, you framed the Biden administration not going after China with this if they choose to not do so as basically letting China get away with the crime of the century. Is that an exaggeration? Is this accurate? How do you describe this?
Well, the crime of the century has so far resulted in 4.5 million deaths outside China. So yes, I think that does qualify. And because of what we know, that they deliberately took steps to spread this disease beyond their borders, that is intentional. This is an intentional causing of death. That's murder. That's crime of the century. 4.5 million people dead so far.
Now, on the biowarfare point, of course, bioweapon or not, as you mentioned, the Chinese Communist Party did weaponize this situation by intentionally spreading it around the world. By closing travel within Wuhan, but keeping the borders externally open, meaning anybody looking to get away from the lockdowns and whatever policies the CCP would make, were able to flee the country. And they did use that to seed the virus to every part of the world. In terms of the biowarfare element, though, there's been a lot of different debates around China's biowarfare programs. The Chinese Communist Party is a signatory of the Biowarfare Act, but as previous reports have mentioned, they never showed examples of them getting rid of existing biowarfare programs. They never even acknowledged the ones we knew they had. What is the state of the Chinese Communist Party's biological warfare programs?
Well, we know that they're active because Chinese military researchers talk about them openly in publications, articles, and books. And the one that is the one that concerns me the most is their program to develop pathogens to attack specific ethnic groups. In 2017, China's National Defense University, in its authoritative Science of Military Strategy, actually wrote an article about a new type of biological warfare of, quote, specific ethnic genetic attacks. Now, Bill Gertz of the Washington Times actually has reported that American officials believe that the Chinese are actually working on such pathogens. And the Chinese themselves have been very open about it because for at least a half decade, a little bit longer, they've been actually talking about these ethnic specific pathogens. And that's why I talk about a civilization killer, because this could end up leaving China as the world's only viable civilization, because all non-Chinese would be either sickened or killed by this. Now, I'm not saying that the Chinese have succeeded in developing such a bug, but that's what they're working toward. And I know that they're putting a lot of effort into it, which means that we have to assume that sometime or another they will succeed. And because we haven't imposed costs for spreading COVID-19, they believe that they can spread the next disease without cost as well.
I know a lot of people would question what would the interest of the CCP be in, as you mentioned, using a civilization killer on much of the world if they were to kill all, say, non-Chinese or people of any one specific racial background, because, of course, that's targeting DNA strands or changing viruses to target specific DNA strands. I guess one big question would be, why would they do that? What would the interest be for them?
They would be able to rule the world. We know that the Chinese have imported the notion of comprehensive national power, CNP. And CNP is a Soviet concept that is a collection of metrics to rank countries according to their power. And China wants to be number one. Now, there's two ways to get to be number one. One of them is you can strengthen your own country, and every country should be doing that. And the second is you weaken everybody else. And I think that Xi Jinping, after he saw what the coronavirus did to devastate China, then decided that he was going to weaken everybody else. Because by weakening everybody else, he could actually increase China's CNP ranking. And that is the maliciousness of the Chinese system.
Now, with the idea of making bioweapons targeted at specific DNA strands related to racial groups, I know a lot of people might say, "Oh, that sounds too sci-fi for me. It sounds too far-fetched." How could we prove that that's a viable approach to making biological weapons?
Well, all we have to do, Josh, is just to read what Chinese military researchers say. We don't have to speculate about this. I think that this would be a hard task to do, but we do know that certain racial and ethnic groups are more susceptible or less susceptible to certain pathogens. And so there is reason for them to think that they might be able to do this. And remember, China has been collecting DNA profiles of foreigners. The largest collection of DNA profiles of Americans, for instance, is not in America, it's in China. And at the same time, China has been enacting laws and strict rules prohibiting the transfer of DNA profiles of Chinese people out of China. And that could very well lead to supporting these notions that they're working on ethnic-specific pathogens.
Now, how is this possible? I guess, what would you tell people in terms of how is this possible?
Well, it's just possible in that our DNA of humans is alike, but there are differences. And so, for instance, my wife comes from Hong Kong, and she told me, during flu season when she was growing up, Chinese people would get flu, but either they didn't get it or it was very, very mild. But the flu did affect the British and other foreigners in Hong Kong much more severely. And so that is something that is an example of what can happen. And you can weaponize that. So China's working on this, and they're devoting money, they're writing about it, speaking about it, which means that we've got to be concerned that they'll eventually find something. Now, as I said, I don't know what the state of their development is, but we do know they're working on it.
Well, folks, 2 months on now, and we are still totally demonetized by YouTube. But given the situation where we have to censor ourselves if we want to really stay on this platform and make it work, we've decided on something else, which is this. We've launched a new platform called Epoch TV, epochtv.com. And through this, we're able to publish uncensored content. News that can criticize anything we'd like, news that can talk about anything we'd like, news that can give you real information from any part of the world about any topic without having to worry whether individuals will censor it. And in this current environment where information is being controlled, where narratives are being controlled, and where anyone who steps outside the boundaries of what is the accepted narrative by the fact checkers, quote unquote, by different big tech organizations, by media organizations, and so on. This is something that we believe is needed for the modern political environment, where people should be able to call things out. People should be able to question things. This is the basis of the Fourth Estate in America. The belief, again, that media should be able to hold government power in check, and that media should be able to inform the public about the issues they should be informed about, because that is the basis of our election system. An informed public making informed decisions. If you control this system of information, you control the political system. And folks, being a media organization, we can't stand for that. And so again, we have created an uncensored platform, Epoch TV. And anyone who wants to support Crossroads or support our broader mission of bringing real news, uncensored news, that's not afraid to stand up for what matters, please check out our website, epochtv.com, epochtv.com. Check out the link below. And folks, please support us there.